Hello, and welcome to Music Stuff with Spock, and part 2 of our look into my orchestrational bag of tricks. And this is a concept I got from my teacher Jim McGraw while I was studying at Humber College. And the concept goes like this. Over time, a composer and a performer comes up with timbral effects, little tricks that can be played on certain instruments. And you stuff them into this imaginary bag. And over time, you have to organize it in various ways. And then when you're on a gig and you're playing a solo, or if you're in the middle of a composition, and you need some effect, some neat thing, then you have a whole bunch at your fingertips. Because of the length of this video, I'm going to split it into yet 2 more parts. So this part is going to mostly look at effects for strings, and the next part will mostly look at effects for winds and percussion. Another basic articulation is the tremolo, and there are 2 different kinds of tremolos. The first one is rapidly playing a single note, back and forth, or a rapid succession between 2 different notes. And this is particularly effective with open strings. On chordal instruments, it can also be a rapid succession between groups of notes. And the second kind of tremolo is a volume amplitude thing. It's when the volume is at a certain level and it drops down to either low or nothing and then comes back and forth up and down. And this gives you a shimmering effect. That can be done with an effects pedal. Keyboards and organs usually have some kind of stop or switch or effect. With wind instruments, it's done with a rapid change of the way you blow. For a harmonica, you go diddle 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 instead of just blowing. With whistles and reeds, you can get a similar effect. With blowholes, it's frequently done with a tuka tuka sound, like that. Tremolos are notated with a slash or group of slashes through the stem of the note, or above the note if it's a whole note. Tremolos can be measured or unmeasured. Measured tremolos go back and forth in an 8th note or a 16th note rhythm. Unmeasured tremolos go back and forth very rapidly with no particular rhythm. And notes that are tied that use tremolos use dashed lines. Now this effect is very effective on strings because on a stringed instrument it depends on where you play it and you'll get a different tone. If I play the cello in the normal place, which is right at the end of the fingerboard, you get that timbre. But if I play it in the middle of the instrument, you get a much more subdued tone. And as I get closer to the bridge, it gets more and more glassy with a lot of overtones. Now this is very effective when you use tremolos. And tremolos down here are neat. And you can also move back and forth. And a number of cellos doing this out of sync is a neat, almost electronic kind of effect. Chords divided amongst several strings playing tremolos is an interesting effect. Trills and tremolos on orchestra bells can be fairly loud, even with soft mallets. So an interesting little effect you can do is to take a nail or a beater of some type and put it between the bars of two notes, and then you get a soft, delicate trill. For a set of orchestra bells, normally you play them like that, and you hit them and you let them ring. An interesting effect is called a mouth tremolo, and it works like this. You hit the note, and then you open and close your mouth in close proximity to the bar. The closer you are, the more of an effect you'll have. You can adjust the speed. And this only works up on this particular set of orchestra bells. It only goes up to around the F or so, and then the frequencies are too small for my mouth to be able to do that. A larger set of orchestra bells, like that thing back there, goes down to the F, and you can do this effect on a vibraphone for most of the range other than the very highest notes. Using a bow on a set of orchestra bells negates the attack, but you still hear the sustain portion of the note. And using that in combination with some of the other effects, the 20th century has introduced a number of noise sounds into composition, and they can be grouped into two different groups: those that are used percussively for rhythms, such as tapping or knocking on the body of the instrument. Another effect is to tap the violin's body with your fingertips or the knuckle. The fingertips give you a soft sound, and the knuckles give you a harder sound. And a whole bunch of instruments doing this together just slightly out of sync is a very interesting effect. And they are frequently notated with X's in the desired rhythm. And two, those that are odd timbral sounds. The 20th century has introduced a number of interesting orchestral effects into the repertoire, and many of them are for strings. For the violin family, instead of just the normal way of playing, which is between the bridge and the fingerboard, like that, we can now play between the bridge and the tailpiece. Bowing the string between the tailpiece and the bridge produces an indefinite screechy note, which becomes distorted when played near the tailpiece. Tapping the tailpiece of the cello with the side of the thumb produces a percussive tabla-like sound. Bowing the bridge of a bass or cello produces a groaning sound. and can be notated with a pictogram of a bridge instead of a note head. The bridge on a violin or viola is much smaller, so you get more of a squeal when you bow them. Composers have used various symbols to represent these sounds. Whatever symbols you do choose to use, put them in a legend at the beginning of the piece to explain what all the symbols mean. And here's an effect you hear a lot, the shriek. A very aggressive noise sound for strings is called the scratch tone. Instead of playing a note normally, we ghost the note. We just touch the string lightly at that point, and then what we do is we play with unusually heavy pressure. And you get that kind of a sound. And as you go higher up the string, the sound gets higher. It sort of follows the harmonic overtone series, but there's so much noise you don't actually hear a tone. You can also finger a note with your thumb and ghost with one of the other fingers for other pitches. You can also scratch between the bridge and the tailpiece for a very aggressive tone. Another basic but infrequently used string technique is playing call legno, which means playing with the wood of the bow. And this is done in one of two ways, and the most frequently used technique is playing call legno battulo, which means hitting the string with the wood of the bow. And at louder dynamics, it produces a note that has a decisive attack. At softer dynamics, it can be used to play a rhythm with very little tone, but it does have a sense of pitch. And there are a number of effects that can be used. A quick jeté produces a rapid downward flush of notes. The other way is to play call legno tratto, which is bowing in the usual manner, but using the wood instead of the hairs. And this gives you a somewhat indecisive, different kind of timbre. Okay, I'm going to cut this off here. It's getting a little long. So we will continue this in part 3, where we will be looking at primarily effects for wind instruments and percussion instruments. But before we go, I've put together another short study, kind of a sound collage, collage of noises, based on the effects that we've looked at in this particular video. So join me for part 3. See you soon.